everybody? As most of you know, my name's Calton. This is my Fern. I actually forgot to start measuring it when we were supposed to. So I only have one round of measurements, and you can see those in my other discussion post. The Fern's been doing okay. It's starting to lose some leaves at the ends of some of the fronds, some of the older fronds. I think that was because I kind of slacked up watering it last week. But I'm gonna pick that back up this week. That was somewhat intentional. I thought I'd been watering it too much, but I guess I wasn't. As you can see, it still has these young fronds that are coming up out of the top. Those are growing really well, and it's still got some new sprouts in there. The older fronds have become more green, and they still seem to be growing too. One part of the plant is still growing better than the other part of the plant. Like this front side here, that seems to be growing a lot better than the back side. And since the first video post, I've been placing this side with more sunlight, and it still hasn't caught up. So I don't know. Hopefully, I'll just keep putting this side here in the sunlight, and hopefully it catches up to the other side. It might just have to do with how it was potted too. It could be potted, I guess, just more back that way, and therefore most of it's wanting to grow out of one side. All right, now I'm going to move on to talking about my grant proposals. Let me put that down. All right, so for my grant proposal, what I've basically done is I started out with a question, and the question I had was specifically, of 3 common plants that you could get, which one would be the best at gathering particulate matter, and also the best at lowering the levels of any type of gas, whether that's a VOC or something else like that, or nitrous oxide or anything like that. So then I started researching what would be the best ways to, what would be the 3 most common plants most of the times that you would see inside of houses. So I decided on Gerber daisies, Boston ferns, and what they call a weeping fig, that's just a ficus tree. And we've all seen ficus trees, just the little tiny trees that you see placed inside. Each one of those can be found right here, right now in Alabama at some sort of Home Depot or Lowe's or other hardware store. They're all pretty cheap. None of them are above $50. I mean, the ficus is even a tree, and I found it, I think it was at Lowe's for $32. So we could use, or in my plan, we would use all one of each type of plant. Or, I mean, I still haven't decided on everything, so we might even need a couple different types of each plant. So after that, I started thinking about what we would test specifically. So I started looking into the ways that you could take air samples and how you would send that, either test that yourself or send that off to a lab to be tested. A lot of the ways that you test or ways to get air samples, I mean, just getting air samples is already expensive. Getting the supplies and everything you would need for that, and then you have to pay to send it off and have the lab to test it and send you back the results. That's even more money. One of the cheapest ways I found was to get what they call a passive diffusion, and it's this media where you set it out in a Mo. Hush. Doing a video. Sorry. my dog heard somebody outside. One of the ways that it uses a solid media to hush, hush, hush. Sit. Good girl. No. It uses the solid media to kind of gather the gases that are in the room or in the air that's around whatever it's tested, and then you would send that off to be biochemically tested to find out what pollutants and at what rates they are in the environment. And even that one was like 200, 225, something like that. And that was for a single-use test that you had to pay for to get tested. So I found the cheapest thing to be monitors. So like an air sample monitoring system. That way it's reusable. You only have to buy one of them, and then you can reuse it for different levels of testing. I found one monitor. It's called the laser egg and chemical monitor. It costs right at $200, but it's able to check particulate matter up to less than 2.5 micrometers, and it also checks for the total volatile organic compound rate in a room. So what I was thinking is in my plan, we could get one of those. In my proposal, we could use one of those and use that single monitor for every test that we would be performing. That way, you wouldn't have to keep buying different tests over and over and over again. You wouldn't have to send things off to the lab over and over and over again, just costing you more money. You could spend that chunk of money there, and other than the plants, that would be the only cost. Everything else you could already have. So in my plan, we would use a room that had little to no foot traffic, something like a closet or a storage room. With it would have a small fan in there to keep air circulating, along with the monitor, and that would be your control. Just the empty room, the monitor, it would get a rating on the particulate matter and the total VOCs in the room itself. Then you would, and I haven't nailed down any test parameters or anything like that either. That I'll get to that more in the future. But then you would simply add a one plant of one type to that room, let it sit, get your measurements using the monitor, take the plant out, check your measurements, put another plant in, check the measurements, take the plant out, check the measurements, and over and over and over again. I also thought this was a pretty decent idea too, because if the total VOCs in the room aren't high enough to get a good measure during the control, you could always just add a small thing of acetone in there, and it would shoot the levels of the VOC up, and then you could put the monitor in there, let it sit for a couple days without adding any more acetone, and then you could add the same amount of acetone in there before you put a plant in there, and just measure your beginning totals, subtract what you end with, and that should be how much the plant takes out of the environment. Also would be, with this plan, I would be answering the question, how many plants would be effective per square foot, you could say, because you can get the measurement of the room and see, or you could also do per cubic foot of air or cubic meter of air. You could see how much each plant cleans a cubic meter of air and how that would affect a building or a floor on a building or one room, and see how many plants that you might need depending on your levels of concentrations of particulate matter and total VOCs before you ever even have to put a plant in there. Um, and that's really all I've got right now. Like I said, I've still got to get my testing parameters set up, I guess, or my testing plan set up. I'm gonna try and make it work around the college schedule, where you're there 5 days a week and you're not able to work the other two. And I'm even gonna try and maybe even get it set up to where a single group is responsible for a single type of plant or something like that, where you can test this during just one class's lab period. So that how we're setting up this grant proposal next semester, they might be able to actually carry out this in their lab time and wouldn't have to come back whenever it's not their lab time, or have to work on it throughout the week or even over the weekend. This wouldn't require that sort of setup or work or takedown or conclusions or anything like that. So about the only thing they would need to do on their own time is calculations or anything like that. But that's all I've got for now on the grant proposal side.